Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Giribharadhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Banachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Giribharadhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Banachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shata Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to Shishiguru and Shigoranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Canto 11, General History. Chapter 5, Narada concludes his teachings to Maharaj Nimi. No, sorry, to Vasudev. To Vasudev. Text number 2. Sri Chamasa Uvacha Mukabahurapadebhya Purushasya Sramai Saha Chatvaro Jaktire Varna Gunairbi Pradaya Pritak Mukhabahurupadebhya Purushasya Sramai Saha Chatvaro Jagyere Varna Gunairbi Pradaya Pritak Mukhabahurupadebhya Purushasya saha Chatvaro jagyere varna Gunairbi pradaja pritak. Please chant. Sri Chamasa Uvacha Mukhabahurupadevya Purushasya Sramai Saha Chatvaro Jaknire Varna Gunairbi Pradaja Pritak. Mukhabahurupadebhya Purushasya Sramai Saha Chatvaro Jaknire Varna Gunairbi Pradaja Pritak. Mukhabahurupadebhya Purushasya Samaishaha Chatvaro Jaknire Varna Gunairbi Pradaja Pritak. Mukhabahurupadebhya Purushasya Samai Saha Chatvaro Jaknire Varna Gunairbi Pradaja Pritak. Sri Chamasaha Uvacha. Sri Chamasa said, Mukha, face, Bahu, arms, Uru, thighs, Padebhya, from the feet, Purushasya, of the Supreme Lord, Asramai, the four spiritual orders, Saha, with, Chatvaraha, four, Jaknire, were born, Varnaha, the social orders, Gunahi, by the modes of nature, Vipraadayaha, headed by the Brahmanas, Pritak, various, translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Chamasa said, each of the four social orders headed by the Brahmanas was born through different combinations of the modes of nature, from the face, arms, thighs, and feet of the Supreme Lord in His universal form. Thus, the four spiritual orders were also generated. Purport. Those who are not spontaneously attracted to the devotional service of the Lord can be gradually purified by observing the Varnashram system of four social orders and four spiritual orders. According to Sridhar Swami, the Brahmanas are born of the mode of goodness, the Kshatriyas of a combination of goodness and passion, the Vaishyas of a combination of passion and ignorance, and the Sudras of the mode of ignorance. Just as the four social orders are born from the face, arm, thighs, and feet of the Lord's universal form, similarly, the brahmacharis are generated from the heart of the Lord, the householder order from the loins, from his loins, the vanaprasthas from his chest, and the sannyas order from his head. A similar verse is found in the Rik Samhita 8.4.19, as well as the Shukla Yajurveda 34.11 and the Atharva Veda 19.66. Brahmano Shyamukat Mukhan Ashit Bahu Ranjaya Kritaha Urutad Asya Jat Vaishya Padbhyam Sudro Jajata. Quote, the Brahmanas appear from his face, the king as his arm, the Vaishya as his thighs, and the Sudras was born from his feet. End of quote. It is understood that pure devotional service to the Lord has already been described by two of the Yogendras, Drumila and Arbihotra. Chamasamuni now describes the system of Vanashram Dharma because this system is meant to gradually purify those who are inimical to the Supreme Lord, bringing them back to their constitutional position of love of Godhead. Similarly, the Virat Rupa or universal form of the Lord is an imaginary form meant to help the gross materialists gradually understand the position of the personality of Godhead. Since the foolish materialist cannot understand anything beyond matter, he is encouraged to see the entire universe as a personal form of the Supreme Lord's body. The impersonal conception of formlessness is a mere negation of temporary material variety without any concept of the Lord's spiritual potency. The impersonal view is another kind of material speculative conception. The Supreme Lord is full of spiritual potencies under the principal headings Hladini, or unlimited bliss, Sandini, or eternal existence, and Sambit, or omniscience. It is understood from this verse that the Vanashram Dharma system generated from the universal form of the Lord is a program offered by the Lord to engage conditioned souls in a complete social and religious system that gradually brings them back home, back to Godhead. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Romapada Swamin Iti Namine. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Yesterday we started a very important discussion. The question was raised, how to establish, what can we do in the society of Krishna consciousness to fulfill this mandate from our founder Acharya to establish Vanashram Dharma? How can we understand that? There are so many confusing questions that are there, and very important discussion. So, at the end of the purport, the disciples of Srila Prabhupada point out a purpose. I read it again. It is understood from this verse that the Varnashram Dharma system generated from the universal form of the Lord is a program offered by the Lord to engage the conditioned souls in a complete social and religious system that gradually brings them back home, back to Godhead. So the purpose is there. The purpose is to facilitate the reawakening of Krishna consciousness in conditioned souls. Conditioned souls in the material world is a fact, is a taken fact, that we come to the material world because we have an inimical disposition towards Krishna. It is explained by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. We quoted the other day, Icha Dvesha Samutena. Icha and Dvesha is the original disposition that we have towards Krishna. And that brings the spirit soul into the material world. Icha and Dvesha. We have Icha, which is the desire to have Krishna's position, and Dvesha, we have envy of Krishna. We have we are inimical towards him. So it's something that is there ingrained in a conditioned soul in the material world. It's the initial thing that brings. So the whole Varnashram system is designed by Krishna to allow the conditioned soul that have this inimical disposition to reawaken one's eternal loving relationship with the personality of Godhead. There's a very nice also, there's so much instructions through the Srila Prabhupada's teachings about Varnashram, the Varnashram system. And there is the initial description that, or Prabhupada gives this very incredible, especially the first canto is full with these instructions. Well, Prabhupada wrote the first canto of the Bhagavatam. He was in Vrindavan prior to coming to the West. He translated the first canto and wrote his Bhaktivedanta purpose that were beyond brilliant, completely visionary, and with a very, very clear understanding of the application of how to establish Krishna consciousness all over the world. Srila Prabhupada simply applied the great vision of both Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And he perfectly understood their vision because they are the visionaries and the strategists, the engineers of the whole worldwide Sankirtan mission that will fulfill Lord Chaitanya's mandate that in every town and village of this world, the Sankirtan, the names of Lord Krishna will be heard. So, Srila Prabhupada understood perfectly and presented that very, very wonderfully in his purpose. And you can read that in the Bhagavad, in the first canto, very, very nice. So I give you an example. I read you. This is what Prabhupada writes in a purport. In the first canto, second chapter, and from the 13th text 13. He writes, the Varnashram institution is constructed to enable one to realize the absolute truth. It is not artificial domination, so pay attention to Prabhupada's very, very important use of words, because it can give us an understanding. Yesterday we were discussing that, how, and in his instructions are there throughout. We have, in our ISKCON intelligentsia have understood that in order to be able to absorb the teachings of our founder Acharya, we have to see the whole body of his instructions. And the application of the study of the body of his instructions is done through this methodology called hermeneutics, which basically you avoid taking things in an isolated manner, but you have to see it within a whole body of instructions, and you have to refer it to all that. So I'm going to try. There's a lot of quotations that I was able to pull in terms of Varnashram that give us insight into this whole body of instructions, at least in a limited way. So Prabhupada writes, the Varnashram institution is constructed to enable one to realize the absolute truth. It's not for artificial domination of one division over another. When the aim of life, i.e., realization of the absolute truth, is missed by too much attachment for indriya priti, or sense gratification, the institution of the Varnashram is utilized by selfish mind to pose artificial predominance over the weaker section. So it's not that. It's actually the whole principle is to serve and to please, to understand the absolute truth. And of course, we know that in this session, Srila Sutta Goswami established the purpose of Varnashram Dharma as Samsidir Haritoshanam. Ata Pumbir Dvija Shestra Vanashrama Vibhagasa Swanushtita Punshan Samsidir Haritoshanam. O best of twice born, Sutta Goswami is directing these instructions to the sages of Naimisharanya. It is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed by one's own occupation, according to caste divisions and orders of life, is to please the personality of Godhead. So this is the definition of Daivi Varnashram. And that is what is being given to us through the whole process of Bhagavad Dharma. Is a divine system that is focused on understanding the absolute truth and to act and to do whatever we have to do according to our occupation or according to our ashram to please the personality of Godhead. Prabhupada, in a purport, also in the first canto, but this is in the 19th chapter, text number 4, he writes, the life of a human being is a chance to prepare oneself to go back to Godhead, or to get rid of the material existence, the repetition of birth and death. Thus, in the system of Varnashram Dharma, every man and woman is trained from this purpose. So Varnashram is a Krishna social system only when it's used as a training ground from bhakti. Bas. That's the principle we're given to understand. It's a principle to understand how to serve Krishna and how to please Krishna. So it's designed like that, mercifully by the Lord, to facilitate just conditioned souls. So the system is given like that. So Daivi Varnashram is Krishna center, is not birth center. And so this archetype of a system, of a social system, is eternal because it's given by the Lord. You know, Chaturvarna, Krishna gave this system. It's his system, it's divine. But this system can be polluted. And the question is, how it can be polluted if it's divine? That doesn't make sense. But just like clear water, Prabhupada gives this example, just like clear water can be polluted when it gets mixed with earth and, other external things. Similarly, this Varnashram system, when it's mixed with Rajas and Tamas, or when it's mixed with these different conceptions, then it can become polluted, and then the result is not going to be to provide and facilitate a system in which we can be elevated to bhakti, but rather it will cause all kinds of disturbances and suffering to the people that are under those things. So the system that Krishna gives us is a blueprint that Krishna offered to humanity for living harmoniously and advancing in Krishna consciousness, in self-realization. So it's a blessing that is given like that. But we have to make sure to have the proper understanding and not mismanage it. And of course, this is a huge responsibility that is given to us, the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, the followers of Srila Prabhupada, that we have to make sure that we don't misunderstand and mismanage. So some of the questions that we were trying to grapple, and we came to a conclusion that it's a little still over our heads, but it is a very important thing for each one of us to try to go deeper and try to understand these things under the teachings of our founder Acharya. And especially we have to be careful of the mixing of rajas and tamas in the organization of a society or social organization, the application of Varnashram. But also we have to be careful of the infiltration of a smarta influence. Because when these smarta influences are there, then the Gaudiya Vaishnavism is eclipsed and sometimes even mutilated. So our acharyas were very strong on fencing and rejecting this smarta type of principles. Especially Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very, very, very strong in establishing this type of things. So, Prabhupada, he writes, well, actually no, I'm going to read you something that is very beautiful, written by His Holiness Srila Radhanath Swami. And it's a very simple but very beautifully put together explanation of Daivi Vanashram, how it can be applied in our society as a principle. This is a quote. We can speak for days and weeks and months and years and lifetimes about Daivi Vanashram Dharma, but in essence, Daivi Vanashram Dharma is to educate people according to their nature and propensity, to utilize their talents in the service of God, to develop pure love of God. We're not these bodies. We're neither man nor woman. We're eternal souls, eternal servants of Krishna. Our goal of life is to awaken our natural love for Krishna, and bhakti, devotional service, is the only means to achieve that. Everyone is conditioned by his previous karma, and therefore, in human society, we find so many different tendencies. We have to serve the Lord with our material mind and senses, but due to our different natures, we cannot all serve in the same way. In every social system, capitalistic or communistic, atheistic or theistic, people have different propensities. Some are natural teachers, priests, leaders, or administrators. Others are happy doing business, buying and selling. Others are happy doing hard manual work, farming, and making bread. We need to develop a social organization within our society to take care of the devotees so they can be happy in Krishna consciousness for the rest of their life. Srila Prabhupada expected us to work together to accomplish this. In our temple in Mumbai, India, Sri Sri Radha Gopinath Mandir, we have tried to implement the spirit of Vanashram in our social development. We are thinking that it is necessary to establish training for the various varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishyas, and Sudras. Srila Prabhupada emphasized it, but it is so complicated because in the city environment it is difficult to identify the real varna of a person. In one level, a grihasta may be living outside as a part of the congregation, doing excellent sadhana, preaching, cultivating many people, and doing pujari service. In this way, he's like a brahmana. But as an occupation, he may be a businessman. That is a Vaishya. Or he may work in a factory. That is a Sudra. So what is he? He is a Vaishnava. End of quote. So, it is important to understand that that the position that we are given and the training that we're given is to become Vaishnavas. And Vaishnavas are transcendental to any of these caste labels. We act according to our propensity, but the principle of a Vaishnava is simply to please Krishna. And a Vaishnava, in order to please Krishna, is ready to do anything in Krishna service, whatever is required for Krishna. It's a principle. The Padma Purana confirms that devotee identity transcends caste labels. Na Sudra Bhagavat Bhaktas Tetu Bhagavata Mataha Sarva Varneshu Te Sudra Yena Bhakta Janardane. Quote, a devotee should never be considered a Sudra. All the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be recognized as Bhagavatas If one is not a devotee of Lord Krishna, however, even if born as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya family, he should be considered a Sudra. That's the Padma Purana. So their real identity, the real Varna identity that we've been trained to, is to be a Vaishnava. So then again, what is the purpose of Varnashram? One of the questions yesterday. What is the purpose? So Prabhupada explains that he wanted Varnashram, the Varnashram parameters, but he explained that don't make establishing Varnashram as the main goal. Varnashram is a means to achieve the main goal. The main goal is to become a pure devotee. So Srila Prabhupada writes, in terms of, he wanted to implement Varnashram parameters in ISKCON, but he also wanted to prevent a mixing up of priorities. He said, to achieve transcendental knowledge, Varnashram, or the institutional forecast of four orders of life, must not be rejected, and neither must it be accepted as the ultimate goal. This is an important thing to understand. Pure bhakti is the ultimate goal. Prabhupada explains further. This is called Transcendental Society or Vaishnava Society, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 6.1.15 is writing. And this is the famous verse yesterday Krishna Archana quoted. Simply by becoming a devotee of Vasudeva, this is a different one. Yesterday was quoted by Devahuti in terms of, even a dog eater can become, a Vaishnava, he's properly trained. But 6.1.15 is that simply by becoming a devotee of Vasudeva Parayana, everything is adjusted. Everything becomes adjusted. So even if you have the misfortune of taking birth in a family of dog eaters, if you become a devotee of Vasudeva, Krishna, everything becomes adjusted. It's the potency of devotional service. My dear Lord, this is 3.33.6, Devahuti said, my dear Lord, even a person born in a family of dog eaters hears and repeats the chanting of your glories, offers respects to you and remembers you, he is immediately greater than a Brahmana and is therefore eligible to perform sacrifices. Therefore, what is to be said of one who has seen you directly? Yesterday we were discussing about this point of that in the Vedic Varnashram system, second initiation was not allowed for Sudras and Brahmanas. But here we're talking about a dog eater that is outside the Varnashram system. And he could be eligible to actually perform sacrifice, meaning Brahminical. It's a Brahminical duty. So he could be elevated. So we can summarize like this understanding. For Vaishnavas, Varnashram is simple. Just try to improve yourself spiritually through a rigorous practice of bhakti yoga. Pick the most appropriate ashram for you, adopt an honest occupation, and learn to serve Lord Krishna with whatever talent and nature you may have acquired. Strive for pure love and don't hesitate to pick up a few new skills on the way. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Whatever is your psychophysical setup, Are you an intellectual, an administrator, a merchant, a manual worker? On a personal level, live a Brahminical lifestyle. Get up early in the morning, keep your body and mind clean, chant your rounds, follow the four regulated principles, eat prasadam, behave kindly, etc. You can also consider moving to the countryside and grow your own food and to protect your children from the ugra karma dynamics of contemporary urban life. It's something that we can contemplate, but at least understand the principle. So, here's, we know Lord Chaitanya also in his teachings emphasized this principle. The principle that we identify ourselves as Vaishnavas beyond the whole caste system. Naham Vipro, Nachara Napatir, Nacha Narapatir, Napi Vaishyo Na Sudro, Naham Varni, Nacha Griha Patir, Navanashto Yatirva, Kinto Prodyam Nikila Paramananda, Purnam Britabder Gopi. This is a famous verse that we quote constantly to remind ourselves of our identity. Gopi Bhartur Pada Kamalayor Dasa Dasa Anudas. I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya or a Sudra, nor I'm a Brahmachari, a householder, a Vanaprastha, or a sannyasi. I identify myself as the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. He is like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of universal transcendental bliss. He is always existing with brilliance. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 13.80. And Prabhupada comments, this is a comment on, he talking about this principle in the second canto, chapter 4, text 18, purport. The system of caste or Varnashram Dharma is not long irregular, even amongst the so-called followers of the system. Nor it is possible to reestablish the institutional function in the present context of social, political, and economic revolution. Yesterday we were talking about that. So, even to the so-called followers, is not regular. Is no longer possible. Lord Chaitanya accepted many devotees from communities other than the Varnashramites, and he himself declared to teach us that he doesn't belong to any caste or social order, but that he is the eternal servant of the Lord who maintains the damsels of Vrindavan, Lord Krishna. That is the way of self-realization. Prabhupada, end of quote. So our identity is Dasa, Dasa, Anudas. Now, are we making an argument, or Prabhupada is making an argument, there's no need for Varnashram? So there's a confusing thing. He's mandating to establish Varnashram, and in the same, other teachings that we don't put ourselves in identifying as part of the Varnashram. We're Vaishnavas. So how do you put this? How? That was one of the questions yesterday's. So again, hermeneutics. Let's try to understand in the full context of our founder Acharya's teachings how to understand these apparently contradictory statements. Prabhupada says, you have to establish Varnashram you have to establish Varnashram. Many times. You have to establish Varnashram. So the question is, what kind of Varnashram then we have to establish, right? What kind of Varnashram? So how exactly it works? Remember the whole concept of Daivi Varnashram. But, there's so many, there's so many isolated instructions that it becomes confusing. So let's see here. What kind of Varnashram? Well, we have to listen to the founder Acharya and not try to make our Varnashram too Vedic. So this is one concept that is there. So you have to establish Varnashram, but not too Vedic. What does that mean? Well, here's what Prabhupada explains on that. He writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita for the whole, and this is his instructions that are there for the whole world for the next 10,000 years. That's what Prabhupada established. Quote, however, this institution is very difficult to establish, Varnashram, in this age. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advises that we do not worry about the Vedic system of Varnashram Dharma. So, another, okay. So, don't worry about the Vedic system that is presenting Varnashram. Don't worry about that. It's too difficult in this age. So, Shivalava made that point yesterday. So what's the point? More on our founder Acharya. So, here, the Yuga Avatar advises us not to worry about the Vedic system of Varnashram Dharma. And our founder Acharya, the great Acharya of Kali Yuga, the preeminent Acharya of Kali Yuga, repeats his advice that we should take this work very seriously. So ISKCON Varnashram is not going to be the Vedic system of Varnashram. That's one understanding. It will be a simplified form focusing on the essence and not the externals. An approach centered on universal principles and not focused on circumstantial details and customs. So we can absorb that. The system that is going to be established in Kali Yuga as presented in the teachings have to be based on the principles, not the externals that we read, in terms of Varnashram, Vedic Varnashram. So here's more on Srila Prabhupada's realism. This is a lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.8 in Vrindavan, 1972. Quote, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew that in the Kali Yuga, practically the Varnashram Dharma will never be observed, or it will be very difficult to observe. So people, by simply observing the Varnashram Dharma, will not be able to make very much progress in devotional service. And this is a lecture, another quote, in Bhagavad Gita 13.67 in Montreal, 1968. Of course, from the Vedic literature, perfection, the path of perfection, is to follow the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashram. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew that this system cannot be introduced strictly at the present moment in this age. And here's a lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6.1.56-62 in Surat, 1971. You have to take this purification process, chanting Hare Krishna. There is no other way. You cannot reform the society. That is not possible. You can train them in the Vedic way. You cannot train them in the Vedic way. So, here's a simple pastime given in the memories of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, quoting a conversation. And it illustrates a principle, how to apply the principle, Srila Prabhupada. So, it is explained, the background. In 1976, in the presence of Srila Prabhupada, a devotee commemorated the first 10 years of ISKCON. And at one point, they brought this big cake, big cake. And Rupanuga Prabhu say, it is a very heavy cake. And Harisori Prabhu, Harisori quotes this in his book, Prabhu, is that cutting the cake, is that Vedic? Did they used to do that in Vedic times? Or is that a Western invention? We were just wondering about it. And Prabhupada responded, prasad distribution. Either you cut or take with your hand, same thing. It doesn't make any difference. Simple, a simple thing, but establish a principle. The principle is prasadam distribution, honoring prasadam. So you do it this, you do it that, it's this way, you cut it with a knife, you eat it with a fork, prasadam distribution. That's the principle. Here's another one. We see a picture of Srila Prabhupada shaking hands with the governor of Geneva. There's a famous picture. Prabhupada shaking the hand. Is that Vedic? One who can say it. But it was perfectly appropriate. Perfectly appropriate because the principle is that one, in a particular circumstance, there is a cordial exchange, respectful exchange between two persons. So either you do pranams or you shake hands. The principle is to have a respectful exchange. And Prabhupada used that like that. So you apply principles. Let me see what time it is. Okay, we still have a little time. Here's another thing to understand the applications, especially understanding Prabhupada's instructions. Prabhupada, on a particular subject, there can be different levels of instructions. This is explained in hermeneutics. And specifically, we're going to be see here that Prabhupada takes one instruction, which is we're going to take this principle or this instruction of equal rights. Equal rights. It's also a hot potato in not only in ISKCON, but it's also a hot potato in the world. This equal rights, equality, is a big issue. So Prabhupada takes this issue and have instructions that if taken out of the context of his full teachings, it becomes confusing, it may be contradicting. But if you're understanding that Prabhupada gives an instructions of this particular subject in different levels, and specifically he's going to give, he applies to the physical level, he applies to the civic and political level, and he applies to the spiritual level. So these three levels, same subject with a different application in the instruction. So see, if you see this, the equal rights. So here's the first example. Prabhupada is speaking to his disciples. I say that if you are equal rights, then make some arrangements. Sometimes you become pregnant, sometimes he becomes pregnant. So Prabhupada is knocking down this equal right. It doesn't make sense. So you're talking about the physical limitation, the physical makeover of the difference between a man and a woman. So Prabhupada continues, I don't say that I don't like women, but I cannot say that equal rights. How can I say it? First of all, show that you equal rights. Your husband becomes sometimes pregnant, and then you become pregnant alternatively. By nature, the woman's body is different from the man's. This is in the morning walk in Vrindavan, 1975. So, no equal right from the physical perspective. Now, a different situation. Prabhupada is talking to a reporter. Do you have woman followers also in this movement? The reporter asked Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, yes. America, men and women have got equal rights. So in this case, he's acknowledging that it's equal rights. But these have to do with civic, a social situation. Like that. There's equal rights, especially in America and the West. It's like that. And here's another one. For God, there is no discrimination. Women, men have equal rights to become godly and back to Godhead. So this is a lecture in Johannesburg, 1975. So we can summarize. So here we have three different statements on the same theme, but addressing three different planes: the physical, the civic, and the devotional. Srila Prabhupada rejects the idea of equal rights on the bodily platform. He acknowledged them on the social-political plane and consistently promotes equal rights on the spiritual platform. People failing to recognize what level he is addressing may become bewildered or may try to overlay one level upon another. We see that all the times, especially when it comes to gender roles. And that's when so many of these controversies, come. And in one sense, we can see that these planes, that are there, that at the end comes to be material and spiritual, these instructions have to do, it's almost like they're in the tatashta, they're how you say, what's the word that is used for tatashta? Is that you're not here, you're not there, you're marginal. You're in the margin, like that. So these different ideas could be this way or could be that way. So we have to be very careful to understand. Prabhupada described, this is another, this is from a lecture in Calcutta, 1974. Banashran Dharma is also material, that is not spiritual. Banashran Dharma is the beginning of a spiritual life. So people tend to mix up pre-Mahaprabhu outmoded social customs with pure Gaudiya standards. As a result, they hinder spirituality and eclipse Lord Chaitanya's purpose. So Prabhupada writes, the system of Varnashram Dharma refers to the three modes of material nature, but transcendental devotional service is on the absolute platform. And then I'm going to just finish with this sort of also hermeneutic tools to understand, to separate or understand principles against details and descriptions about prescriptions against prescriptions. And this is important. When we are reading and studying things, we have to understand what is the difference between a description and what is the difference between a prescription. Like that. So, one of the things that I'd read this. One of the principles of Varnashram is the interdependence. That's how a thing works. The interdependence in all the pieces that are there. So everything have to work as a system that is interdependent with one another. And so, as a fundamental concept, this interdependence is there, and we can see it in one sense as a puzzle. To complete the full picture, you have to have all the pieces there, and they have their function. So, but to fully understand this, we have to make sure that we understand this principle. So say, when something has a description and not a prescription, and then there's some strict examples, and I give you some that Prabhupada quotes, that, when it comes again to establish Vedic principles in modern society, we have to understand that, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, what is all in Prabhupada's teaching or the teachings of our Acharya, what is being described and what is being prescribed. So here's something that you tell me. This is in the pastime in the Bhagavatam of Shunakshepa. This is Maharaj Harishchandra, when he approaches, he needed to do a human sacrifice, and he approaches a person to do that human sacrifice, that pastime. So in the purport, Prabhupada explains, it appears that in those days a man could be purchased for any purpose. Harishchandra was in need of a person to sacrifice as the animal in a yajna and thus fulfill his promise to Varuna. And a man was purchased from another man for this purpose. Millions of years ago, animal sacrifice and a slave trade both existed. Indeed, they have existed since time immemorial. So no one in his right mind will conclude that human sacrifice is described in there, so it must be, it must be okay. Or human trade, a slave, these things. So no one will say that would be recommended. So that's a description of a particular time, in a particular situation. So those are not recommendations. Here's another one. In terms of brahmacharis, brahmachari dress. Prabhupada writes, or he translates, this is actually translated from the 7th canto, chapter 12, text 4. Carrying pure kusha grass in his hand, the brahmachari should dress regularly with a belt of straw and a deerskin garment. He should wear matted hair, carry a rod and a water pot, and be decorated with a sacred thread, as recommended in the Shastras. But we don't have any evidence that Srila Prabhupada directed the brahmacharis in our movement to dress like that. Rather, dress in saffron cloth with clean-shaved head. That's the attire of the brahmacharis. Now, is Prabhupada disobeying the instructions of the Bhagavatam? No. Prabhupada is applying the principle. So what is the principle that is there? That either shaved head or matted hair. At the end is the simplicity, the not being involved on trying to have a nice hair. So either you shave it or you have matted hair. The principle of renunciation is the same. And when it comes to the dress, well, if you live in the forest, maybe deer skin and how you say the tree bark is much more accessible. But if you live in an urban, in Mumbai or New York or Chicago, it's going to be more difficult to find this type of materials. And even if you go out, in some tree bark, dress, people are going to, you're going to end in jail or something like that as a crazy person. So it's not practical. So the principle is there, the application of the principle. Here's another tool. Shastras never change, but applications do. So the Shastras are eternal. Evam parampara praptam. The Krishna give this eternal knowledge to Arjuna, he says. So, imam vishwashate yogan proktavam, that this knowledge is eternal. So it never changes. But the application can change. So, Prabhupada writes in here, let me see. What Krishna said 5,000 years ago is the same thing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. Same thing. There was no change. Shastra, there is no change. Not that modernized. The Shastra should be changed. No. That is nonsense. That is not Shastra. Shastra cannot be changed. Circumstantially, it will be changed, seasonal changes. No. That is not Shastra. So people that make an argument, circumstantially we can. Shastra means it is perpetual. What Krishna said 5,000 years ago, or Krishna said in some 40 million years ago to the sun, Imam Vishwashate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam. He says, I'm talking to you that Puratanam Yogan, not that because it has passed millions of years, and now it is a different time, so I will have to change. No. He say, I'm talking to you the very old system. Is it not? Just see. Shastra cannot be changed. God's words cannot be changed. Then, what is the difference between God and ourselves? He's always perfect. He's always perfect. What he said 40 million years ago and what he said 5,000 years ago is also correct up to date. That is Shastra. Not that so many years have passed and it has become old. Now let us reform it and put it in a new way. No. You can put the same thing in a new way, but you cannot change the principle. So there you go. Sadhu Shastra Guru Vakya Chichete Korija Aikya. Shastra is never changed. And the sadhu? Sadhu means who follow the Shastra. He's sadhu. he also does not change. Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru. Guru means who follows the Shastra and Sadhu. So there are three, the same. A Guru will not change. That it was spoken 5,000 years ago. That is not applicable now. No. Now I am giving you something new, jugglery. He is useless. Sadhu, Shastra, Guru, Vakya, Chichete Koriya Aikya. Ya Shastra Vidin Utsiya Vartate Kama Karata. Na Shidin Apnoti. These things are there. So Shastra cannot be changed. At the same time, you can put the same thing in a new way, but you cannot change the principle. That's why the role of the acharyas is so essential. They decipher perennial principles and translate it into contemporary applications. Acharya, first of all, distinguish principles from details. Principles are unchangeable, details are not. The principle of a brahmachari being a celibate is eternal. How they dress is transient, detail. The principle of the brahmachari serve his teacher, his guru, is eternal. How he serves will vary. The Vedic age brahmachari may go in the jungle to collect wood for a fire yagya. The modern age brahmachari may go in the busiest part of the city to sell books as part of the Sankirtan yagya. In this regard, the principle of yagya, sacrifice, is timeless, and the acharya will determine the specific form for the yagya take place. I know we're a little over time, but I think it's important to say this last one part, which you have to touch with this question that yesterday was at the core in terms of the woman's role in Vanashram. And so one of them is the argument of how you say, the capacity that a woman have in terms of becoming a brahmana, a teacher, or have, even taking the position of a spiritual leader, a guru. So one of the arguments that is given that are part of the traditional Vedic system of Varnashram is, and that finds, some backup in the stories of the Bhagavatam, is specifically one that is given is Suniti Devi, the mother of Dhruva Maharaj, declining because of her position as a woman to give initiation to Dhruva. It's part of the narration. I read it to you. It's very interesting. Unfortunately, there are cases. Hold on. No. Yeah. Suniti did not initiate her son, Dhruva. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 8. As a universal prohibition on Vaishnava Diksha Gurus. So this is the interpretation. So the fact that this appear also sort of supports the prohibition of Vaishnava Diksha Gurus. Suniti was living in the first Manvantara of this day of Brahma. More than 1.5 billion years ago, Satya Yuga, initiations were different from the present day ones. But more importantly, Srila Prabhupada never ever linked the episode of Suniti not initiating Dhruva to ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada never say wrote that because because Suniti didn't initiate her son, no ISKCON Vaishnavi should ever initiate. This is what Prabhupada writes on this point. In many, there's a lot of quotations of Prabhupada saying exactly the opposite. That when qualified, of course, anyone can become a spiritual master. He writes, this is a letter to Hansadutta Prabhu on 1969. I want that all my spiritual sons and daughters will inherit this title of Bhaktivedanta, so that the family transcendental diploma will continue through generations. Those possessing the title of Bhaktivedanta will be allowed to initiate disciples. Prabhupada, a letter to Malati Prabhu in 1974. Actually, male and female bodies, these are just outward designations. Lord Chaitanya said that whether one is a Brahmana or whether he may be, if he knows the signs of Krishna, then he is to be accepted as Guru. This is a Vyasa Puja lecture in 1973. My dear sons and daughter, you have to become spiritual masters. You, all my disciples, everyone should become spiritual master. I hope that all of you, men, women, boys, and girls, become spiritual masters. So, the narration of Suniti is descriptive. It's not a prescription for contemporary Vaishnavism. That's something that we can see and understand with the body of instructions of Srila Prabhupada. There's another instances in which why not giving or trusting devotees in the female body with this type of responsibilities. And one quotes, Prabhupada does that, he quotes Chanika Pandit, making the famous statement that never place your faith in a woman and a politician, right? It's something that we read in so many instances by Srila Prabhupada. So, Prabhupada quotes that in one situation, one occasion. This is in a lecture in London, 1973. He says, never place your faith in a woman or a politician. Of course, when a woman comes to Krishna consciousness, that position is different. Krishna Archana was saying that yesterday. We're speaking of ordinary woman, Sudra and Vaishya. They also can become fully Krishna conscious by training, and they can also go back to Godhead without any check. So when we study things from a material point of view, these things are to be taken care. But when a man and a woman become Krishna conscious, he or she takes care of herself or himself. And then Prabhupada gives this deeper insight on Chanika Pandit's mood. He said, he was a politician and his wife was kidnapped. He had a very bad experience of these two things. Therefore, he gave the injunction, never trust a woman and a politician. So, there's more to it, like that. In a conversation in Africa, an African man asked Srila Prabhupada, since there is no distinction between man and woman, These are both designations. Is it possible for a woman to become a Brahmana? Brahmananda is there. This was in Nairobi. Tells Prabhupada, is it possible for a woman to become a Brahmana? Prabhupada say, woman is a Brahmana's wife, then she's automatically a Brahmana. African man. Suppose she doesn't want to get married for the rest of her life, just want to serve Lord Krishna. Prabhupada. So, in his spiritual position, everyone is a Brahmana. Brahmananda. But you give Brahminical initiation to a married woman. Yes, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, yes. But on a spiritual point, she's a Brahmana. On the spiritual platform, there is no such distinctions. Anyway, there's more and more and more. There's a lot of material. But you got a little picture that there's a lot that we have to understand from the perspective of the full teachings of our founder Acharya, and to be very careful to understand the mood of our great Acharya in applying the principles in order to establish this Varnashram Dharma, or being able to organize ourselves in the social structure and the educational principles that are there in our social system. All right. It's super late and I apologize, but I think I got inspired by your question yesterday, and also it's an important thing to understand. I don't know if you want to ask some question or bring a point. Okay, we stop here, and I'm sure the discussion will continue and continue. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.